Good afternoon. My name is Jared. This is my channel, Mazda B3K. In this video, what we're going to be covering is upgrading my 1989 Ford F350 7.3 liter IDI diesel truck to a 7 and 4 pin connector with compatibility for a brake balance controller. Without further ado, let's get into it. So let's get an introduction to the vehicle. This is my 1989 Ford F350 7.3 liter diesel named Bertha. And Bertha is a very capable truck, but back in 1989, Ford, even with the tow package, didn't really outfit her for what today's needs are. I've removed it, but initially there was, I think, a 5-pin connector here. And you see presently I have a 4-pin connector that I have installed. It came from a different kit, but that's still not quite what I need because I have trailers like that one. And then over here, like that big guy back there, that they require a 7-pin, particularly an RV style 7-pin connector. That's what this video is all about. So if that sounds like what you need, stay tuned. We're going to dig into it. All right, let's lay out the parts. Let's lay out where we can find it, and let's lay out, well, what vehicles is this good for, right? So first thing, we need a dual port 4 flat to 4 and 7 connector. That's all this is. There's no pigtail behind it or anything. It's just the connector. This is from Reese Tow Power. We're going to need this brake controller wiring kit from Tow Ready. And what this lets us do is take the existing 3-wire connector for a brake balance controller that I do have in Bertha and convert it into something that a modern controller can use. So definitely needed. The last thing you're going to need, at least to get your wiring ready, is this Takancha trailer wiring kit. This is specifically for Fords of this era, and it allows you to have plug and play capability. Plug this into the existing wiring in the truck. I'll show you where that goes, and that grants you 4-pin flat, which is the basis upon which we're going to build all this up. Lastly, we have this Takancha Prodigy P2 brake balance controller. Now, with the wiring kit here, pretty much any brake balance controller should work for you. This is one that I chose personally because I have a P2 in a different vehicle, and it works extremely well for what I need. Has proportional braking that you can set, has the emergency handle so you can take the manual control of your trailer braking. Has a bunch of cool features in it, and it mounts pretty much anywhere you want it to mount. As you can see, this is what it looks like on TrailerJacks.com. It's sold as a single kit. It is sold under Takancha branding, even though it does have some non-Takancha parts. Okay, so we have the kit, we have where we find it, we have what's in the kit. What trucks is it good for? So this kit is good for any 1987 to 1996 F-Series trucks. Doesn't matter if it's a 150, 250, 350, doesn't matter. It'll work. It also is good for your 1997 and potentially your 1998 Ford F-Series HD trucks. Basically the trucks that were Super Duty trucks before the Super Duty moniker was introduced in, I want to say 1998, I think it was. So it'll cover any Ford trucks. Effectively, it's going to cover your bullnose Fords, your brick nose Fords, and your OBS Fords. In a nutshell, is what this kit will cover. All right, one more thing to get out of the way before we kind of dive into this and get started is some disclosures. I purchased this kit with my own money, though I am making this video with some support from TrailerJacks.com. I am expecting a reimbursement upon successful completion of this video. Just putting that out there so folks are aware. Now that we've got all the talking done, we have the parts introduced, we have the applicable trucks talked about, let's actually get into the work. The first thing we're going to want to install is this guy. We need to get our 4-pin flat installed, so we need to get this Takancha unit installed. And let's take it over to the truck, show you exactly where that needs to go in. All right, welcome to the underside of Bertha. Now, specifically, where am I at? I am at the driver's side, behind the wheel, almost at the bumper, basically below the rear fuel tank. And you'll see that there is this connector here, right? You can see it goes, I've got it sticking all the way through. This is what's called the T connector, which is the Takancha thing that I just grabbed. This one is from Reese. I'm going to remove it to put the Takancha in because I prefer Takancha when I can get my hands on it. So after I get that one out, I will show you how this looked originally before I installed this T, and then how you need to install it to make everything work. Okay, so this is the T connector in its natural form before it's connected to anything. And what it's designed to do is to insert itself between an existing connector on your truck back here in this corner. And this is what that looks like before you install the T. Now, one thing I'm not 100% on is if you need the tow package on your truck. I think you do to have this connector. If not, you can still make this happen, but it gets a little bit more difficult because you're gonna need to splice into wiring, and I don't have a kit for that, so that's outside the context of this video. But for this video, you need to get into this connector, and as you can see, on mine, the tab is broken, but there's a small tab that should be here, and that is the retainer for this connector. And what we need to do is push down on that tab, and then I'm gonna need both of my hands to do this, but we pull apart this connector. And then after we pull it apart, we can insert our four flat. All right, what I found to work out the best here is you take your T, which needs to be in this kind of orientation because this guy here needs to plug into this wire here. And then this one here that my fingers are on, that needs to plug in to this right here. And the only way you can make that happen is take the T and you're gonna push it through this way. Obviously you want to connect that. And then you want, after you get this side connected, go ahead and connect this side over here. I can show you that in just a second. All right, let's see if you guys will actually be able to see anything at this angle. It's kind of a funny one, but that's what we got to work with. So let's get this, kind of push it through there, because these connectors are keyed. Pull that down and show you real quick. So you see how on the connector you've got these plastic tabs kind of in funny places? That's to key it so that no other connector can attach to it except the right one. As you can see, you've got grooves in this connector here to line up with that. So you have to spin it and line it up appropriately if you're going to get it to actually seat. So if we take a look, we're going to need, let's see here, I'm going to insert this kind of at 12 o'clock. Here we go. And then we're going to push it in. Like so. Okay, so this side's in. You need to do this side first. And then your other side here is a bit more, turn the camera so you can see, This side's a bit more simple, just because you have more room. You're going to spin your connector around, get it to line up where you need it, push to click, then you can kind of tuck this back, and that's it. You now have 4-pin capability. So if that's all you need, perfect. There you go. But we want more than that. So the next step for us is figuring out how to get this converted to 7-pin using the Reese 4 and 7 connector kit that we have back on the bench. All right, so when we unbox our connector, let's see what we get. We get a bracket. We get an RV style 7-pin. We get a 4-flat, which you already have, but we're gonna have to do some wiring here to make all this work. So interesting. Oh, I see. That's pretty cool. So this 4-flat is going to plug into the 4-flat we already have existing that we just set up. That's going to power this 4-flat here, and then what that's going to leave us with is handling these wires here. Okay, and that's for your 7-pin. Like, this is your ground. I'm not sure what these three are going to be, but all right, that's how that's going to work. And then you have to snake it through there, but you can see you'll put this in behind that. That's your bracket. Your 4-flat's supposed to tuck in here, right? Yeah, 'cause it sits further back. And there you go. Now I have a non-standard bumper on my truck, so we'll have to kind of figure out what to do with that, but we'll figure it out. And the other thing we have here, got some hardware, right? We have some self-tappers. That's to hang your bracket. And then the black screws are going to be to attach the 7-pin to the hanger. All right. And then the very important thing, instructions. So it looks like we have some instructions here. And it looks like we also have some instructions here. Oh, those are even in English. How cool is that? And then we have the rest of these in some other languages. So I'm not going to sit here and read directly from instructions. That's not why you're watching this video. You want someone to go do the heavy lifting for you and to show you how we got to do what we got to do. So let me read this, then I'll get back with you. Okay guys, I did more reading, and it turns out that before we can complete our 7 and 4 connector, we got to take care of this first. And the reason why I bring that up is this piece of the wiring here. So you have black and blue duplex. That's supposed to go straight to your trailer connector. That's what we need to handle that. Goes back to ground, but this comes off of our brake controller. So we're going to need to get our brake controller sorted before we handle this. And how much wiring shenanigans we got to do is going to be dependent on what wiring Ford already provided to us. So let's go take a look at that. Okay, so context here, I have a 1989, and I'm sure that Ford improved the towing package over time. But in 1989, if you're doing this, this is what you get. You get a 3-pin connector, and you see it has a blue wire, black stripe. It has a red wire, and a red and a green. So, okay, I apologize. This came out a little bit smaller than I wanted when I did my screenshot here. But this right here is our trailer plug. specifically this part here, to trailer electronic brake control. So this is our connector right there that we just looked at. So we have 3 wires feeding into it. This claims to be hot at all times, but off camera I tested it with a voltmeter, and I did get battery voltage, but only when the key was in the run position. Did not get it, just with the key out or anything like that. So this is a red wire, and if you've never seen one of these diagrams before, don't sweat it. That's a fusible link. It's a 20 gauge, so roughly a 20 amp. So that will work as far as what we need as protection on the circuit. And then this is a red wire. It goes through a connector here, before ultimately getting to a connector right here, which is the one we looked at. So that is our hot wire. And then over here, we have give you a better point to look at. We have a red with light green stripe wire, and that goes to our trailer brake lamps, right? So we can take that one, and it too feeds up into our plug. The last wire we have over here is a blue wire with black stripe, and this goes to our electric brakes. So this is the signal for our electric brakes, and we see that also comes up here, goes through a couple of connectors, but ultimately comes up here to the trailer connector you saw on the floor in the cabin. So with that knowledge, we can go ahead and we can take a look at our wiring diagram from Concha and see what this is going to give us. Okay, this is our generic wiring diagram for Concha on how you're supposed to wire this in if your truck or car, or whatever it may be, is not new enough to have just a ready-to-go plug that you can plug into. And we fall into that category with our 1989. So we have 4 wires that come off of the brake controller itself. There's a pigtail that plugs in right here, and you have 4 different colored wires that are going to come off of that. Now, the black wire is your hot, or it's your battery positive wire, and they want it ran through a circuit breaker to the battery. We don't need to do that because we have our red wire. So we'll make a note here. We have our red keyed power from our brake controller plug, right? And then it wants a red wire that's supposed to go into the cold side of your brake on-off switch. So this is, Ford calls it a brake on-off switch. It's got different names for different manufacturers. I like to call it the boo, but it's a switch that is mounted up on a rod on your brake pedal, and when you push the brakes, it pushes this switch ever so slightly, and that turns your brake lights on. So what we need to do is we're going to take that pigtail wire and we're going to splice it in on the cold side of that switch, and we'll get into that in a couple minutes when we start splicing. So we don't get anything for that for this wire. We're still going to have to run a splice. And then we have a ground, white. Now notice this needs to be a battery ground, okay? We can't just pick a ground point. There is a ground point near the fuse box. We can't do that. We need to make sure that this is grounded against the battery. So we're still going to need to run a wire through the firewall and get it back to the battery and add a ground there. So that's going to be a little interesting. And it would be nice if we could do white to white. We'll see about that. And then the last thing we have here is blue, which is for our electronic brakes, right? Well, we do happen to have that. We have that off of our blue wire with black stripe that we covered a minute ago. So we know for this we can use our blue with black stripe. And forgive my handwriting, I am left-handed, and it didn't matter how much my teachers tried. My handwriting never got really any better than this, and believe me, they tried, but it didn't work. So we have 2 of those 3 wires we can utilize, and then we still are going to have to do a splice on stoplight, and we're still going to have to run a wire for our ground. So, took a look around, and I have determined that right here in this area is where I think the best place to mount this. That's should give us enough wire that we can go back and we can maybe zip tie around the steering column to keep our wires out of the way of our brake pedal and our throttle, and then make our way down to our connector and still allow us to tap into the brake on-off switch, which is right there. And you see we have 2 wires coming out of it. You can actually see that somebody in the past, previous owner, they decided to tap here to do some testing. So you have a green, and you have a green with pink stripe, I believe, are your wires. Alternatively, what some people will do, that I have read as I've been preparing this video, is they'll tap into the appropriate wire off of essentially the combination switch loom. This is the loom of wires that runs up to the steering wheel that handles your turn signals, your hazards, cruise control, things like that. So you can snag the appropriate wire here as well. And I believe the wire color is the same as long as you've got an original. This is a aftermarket, so the wire colors may not be the same. Okay, to install this, we are provided with some Phillips headed self-tappers, like number 2 Phillips. I have a bunch of these at home. This is just a 1-inch self-tapper with a 1/4 head on it, and I will use that. I'll get that installed here, and then we'll go ahead and finish installing the controller, and then we'll do some fitment checks to make sure we can easily reach it and manipulate controls on the fly if we need to. So I am doing this all by hand to show you that you don't need any power tools or anything to do this. Screw gun would be real handy right here, but you know, you're just a dude working in his garage. That's what I'm trying to do here. Alright, so I'll do final adjustments on how I want those screws after I put the controller in and kind of pivot it how I want to pivot it, and I'll show you that here in a second. When you are installing the controller, at least in my case, you've got 2 holes for adjustability. So I'm trying the lowest hole right now. And yes, this is wiggling quite a bit because I don't have these fully tightened up. But as you can see, when you tighten these fully, the controller itself, I mean, you can force it, but the controller doesn't want to pivot up and down anymore. So you can kind of pick at what angle you want the controller to sit. And that matters as far as being able to see, right? And being able to reach controls. So you have the manual brake, right? In case there's an emergency, you need to hit that. This adjusts proportion, so that's good to have access to. And then this controls modes. So I like where that's sitting. If I'm driving, you know, my legs shouldn't wind up hitting this, at least with the way I position myself. This is how I've decided to set things up. I'm pretty happy with where it is, being able to get to everything. And then you'll notice I've plugged in the pigtail. You kind of see what we're working with. And what I found out pretty quickly was that I'm gonna need to run it above the wires in the combination switch loom, the steering wheel loom, and then we can take that and run it back over this way. And if you bring this up, you do have overlap. There'll be enough there to get the job done as long as we get it right the first time. We should be fine. And if not, have no fear. We can always add wire to extend it. Just it introduces more contact points in your wire to where you could have potential issues down the road. So let's not do that unless we have to. But that's how we're doing that. Next step, we need to cut this connector off, but before we do, or before you do, make sure that Big Red here doesn't have any power on him. Okay guys, check this out. This is the reason why it's always good to double check. So I've back probed in to our Big Red wire, which I know is supposed to be hot at all times. I thought it wasn't, because as you look at the meter, I touched it to just a random metal surface. You get a little voltage, but it's kind of in the realm of noise. But check this out. There's a ground located right there at the fuse block. And if I touch my probe directly to the bolt head on the ground, take a look. That's battery. So yes, this is hot at all times, which means if we want to cut this and not buzz ourselves, we trust in our rubber insulated tools or we disconnect the batteries. I'm going to disconnect the batteries out of an excessive amount of caution. Besides, we're going to need to run some extra wires to the battery terminals anyway. Battery is off. Let's go ahead and cut our wires we want. Now, Takancha did include for this job, they gave us 2 yellow and 2 blue what are called butt connectors. And the way these work is you feed them into a wire and then you squeeze them and it mechanically joins the wire by squishing the wires together. I do intend to do that, but not with what they provided. I prefer to use, I call them marine, but really they're weather resistant connectors. Same deal, you've got a metal crush tube that you squeeze, but then you come back with a heat gun and you shrink down the plastic, which creates a seal that keeps water and contaminants out. So I'm going to use that. You can get a kit like this on Amazon very inexpensively. Just don't get the absolute cheapest one because the shrink tubing doesn't shrink very well when it's that cheap. So this will go in the rainy day fund. I'm using those. Wanted to introduce my tools real quick. You can do something as simple as just some pliers with these. That's what a lot of guys do. I've done this enough that I actually wanted some tools, so I bought them. This is an automatic wire stripper made by Klein. I guess it's a 11061. You feed your wire in this way, and then you line it up. You can adjust how deep you want it to strip. Squeeze. Done. You get a nice clean strip every time as long as it's adjusted appropriately. Works great for stranded wire, not so much for solid core, but it'll still work. And then this is your squishing tool, right? Some people use pliers. I use this. This is an actual Klein Tools crimper. You can see it's color coded to line up with these various sizes of butt connector tubes. And as long as you do everything correctly, it works great. We're going to start out with our power wire. I know this is our power wire without even memorizing the schematic because this is our biggest, heaviest, thickest wire. So they went ahead and they pre-stripped it for us. We checked to make sure that all of our wires are still here. We also, what I like to do is try to give them a little twist if I can. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But this looks pretty good. So the next step is we need to identify which size butt connector we need. The wire, I know you probably can't read it here, but it does say this is 12 gauge. That's an AWG is American wire gauge. So this is a 12 gauge wire. which means we're going to need supposedly one of our yellow connectors. One of these. You see that it's labeled for ranges. This is 12 to 10. I think that's a little on the large side, so I'm going to try to squeeze it into a blue, which is 16 to 14. So let's see what we get here. Get you in frame because this is very zoomed in. Oh yeah, perfect. So we'll go with the blue. Then what we need to do is you're going to wind up making 2 crimps total, 1 crimp per side. So we get our tool, we're going to pop it open. This is going to be kind of awkward because I'm trying to show this. But you're going to slip it in, and then there is a notch in the middle of our tube. And you're going to use that as a guidepost. You use that to divide which side that you're squeezing. Go ahead and give her a squeeze all the way. Let her go. And that's it. Then I always give it a couple of tugs because I still screw up sometimes like that. The wire wasn't fully seated in the barrel when I crimped, so it didn't work, which means that I probably need to pull this back a hair to make sure that it's in. So I'll get my wire stripper and do that. All right, we're going to try this again. Made the wire a little longer. Got it more firmly seated. You still want to make sure you're keeping pressure on it so that you do not lose the wire and that it comes out of the barrel. We don't want that. So give her a squeeze. See what we got this time. Looks like I was way off on my crimp, but it's holding. So this will work. There, that's how we do it. What we'll do when we get the wire in the other side is about where my thumb is, you'll squeeze there and deform that barrel. And that'll be a mechanically complete connection. And we'll be good to go. And the next thing I'm going to tackle is our ground, which for that we're going to lean on that big tow ready kit that was in here. It comes with 2 spools of duplex wire, one that's 10 feet, one that's 20 feet. We're going to use the 10-foot wire to create our ground. As a reminder, this guy. Taking a look at the situation, 2 things occur to me. Number 1, I had this fixation with routing it from the passenger battery all the way around. I don't know why I was thinking that. This is a diesel. I have 2 batteries to play with. So the best bet for us is going to be to terminate against the negative lug on the driver's battery. That gives us the straightest shot to do it, and running the wiring will be pretty straightforward. And we should have more than enough with our 10-foot run to be able to do that. However, the question is, where do you go through the firewall? So what I have done in the past, I'm going to see if I can get it visible for you, is do you see, where did you go? There it is. Right here. That is your trailer wiring. And you see I snuck a wire through that grommet. That is for my manual glow control. That's another story for another day. But that's the grommet I want to go through. And this is a case where having a grommet that's basically fossilized after 40 years of use comes in handy. I was able to feed it through without a major issue. So now we can easily pull up and over here to our negative battery terminal. As far as routing it, if this routing is fine for my hood pop, I think it should be fine for my wire. I'm going to go ahead and terminate. Same basic process as you saw with the butt connectors, but instead of a butt connector, we are given ring terminals. And this comes from our tow ready kit. And again, I have the weather resistant version of this that I will be using. But we pick an appropriate size for whatever lug you're connecting to on your negative battery terminal. And go ahead and connect it up. Then we'll trim up on the inside and connect to our controller. Giving a little bit of extra wire here so that way I can leave this attached and move the negative and we don't have a problem. That is a big ground wire. I dig it. See here, let's get the appropriate sized terminal here. It's a little on the big side. And this is a little too small, so we'll go with the other one I had. Yep, this will do it. All right. See if we can't sneak that in there. If it's not big enough, we'll bump up a size to our yellow ones. Looks like we got to go yellow. Yep, no issue at all. Get that wedged in there. Go ahead, get my crimper. And on this one, what you're aiming for, it may be a little hard to see, is right there. Again, the metal, basically the metal barrel, right? So we go for yellow. We make sure we have our barrel and we squish. And we see if we got it. Yeah, we got it. All right, so we can go ahead and we'll take, where do I want to put this? I want to put this like this because I want the lock washer to still be able to compress. So we'll take this off. Put that on there. Put this back. Okay. There we go. Now, I don't do any of the heat shrink stuff until I'm happy with what I have, because as long as you don't have it heat shrinked, if you need to, you can take your dikes, you can cut into the barrel where you did the crimp, and you can recover most of your wire. Something I learned a while ago as I was learning how to use all these tools. All right, to the cabin. Let's get that side done. A quick note here. We already know that this white ground needs a 10 gauge to fit correctly. But we also know that our ground off the controller is really, really tiny. So we have two choices. We can either trim away some of the strands on our ground to make it fit into a smaller butt connector, or we can strip a really long section of this wire and then fold it on itself to make it fit, and that's what I chose to do. This will work, just make sure that when you crimp, you're crimping firmly on what you folded so it doesn't go anywhere. Okay, wanted to show you this because this is pretty cool and it shows that we're on the right track. I went ahead and I finished with my ground wire, right? So at this point, we have ground, we have our hot, and if you put a battery back on, check this out. Controller powers up. Now obviously at this point, it's still unhappy with you because it can't talk to anything, but we have power. And that's pretty cool. Good morning. let's pick up where we left off. And we were looking at what needed to happen for our red and blue wires off of our brake controller. So we know the blue wire goes to our blue and black. We determined that earlier. And our red wire is supposed to go to the cold side of our brake on-off switch. So I did some more research, and I know it is very difficult to see this. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit on the pertinent part. There we go. Okay, again, apologies for it being a little fuzzy. I'll point this out for you. So this is the wiring, for my truck at least. This is an 89 F350 with a diesel for your brake, your stoplights, right? And this guy here is the actual brake on-off switch. So you'll notice up here we have a hot at all times that's coming out of the fuse box. That's what this is here. And what we see is that this is a red with a white stripe coming out of there, but then it turns into a light green with red stripe that's hot coming into our switch. But then coming out of the switch so let me back up slightly. You see how the default position of the switch is open? That's what this means. See how it's not connected? So this would be with the brake pedal up and you not pushing it. When you push it, this gate is going to close, and that is when your brake lights turn on, right? So in the default position with the switch open and the gate open, the cold side of this switch is going to be our light green wire with no... To make life a bit easier to get our splice in, I went ahead and disconnected our brake on-off switch. You can see we've got a retention tang right here. If you lift it up slightly, and it'll pull right off. Now, as I had mentioned, somebody had already come in and they had done a tap up here, and that's not a bad place to do a splice in, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And they had already tapped the light green wire, which is our cold side. So that's what we're going to do. And what we're going to need to do here is pick a side that we want our red wire, which is our stoplight wire, to come in on. And we're going to put two of those wires on one side of our butt connector, and then the other side will be just one wire. That's what you have to do. With our connection for our electronic brakes knocked out, which is this guy here, we are done with our brake controller. And there's the stub I put on here that I'll shrink that down to seal it off. Let's go back to the bench and let's figure out what we need to do for the 7-pin connector we're installing in the back. Here is our new circuit breaker. You'll notice there's one, it's probably galvanized steel, and then one copper terminal. Your copper terminal up top, that goes to your battery feed, and then your auxiliary feed is the one on the bottom. Again, just made my little jumper over to the hot at all times on the starter solenoid here. We're going to make sure that we don't accidentally contact anything else over here. Try to slit this in between all the other junk that's on here. Because believe you me, there's a lot of stuff here, and that's just normal for how this truck is set up. If you look at one that's not coming up on 40 years old and it's been modified, kind of do that. Bring our other end over here. Get this back on. Okay, is that so I have a 13 on my solenoid there. Grabbed an 8. Looks like that's too small, probably a 10. Get that tightened up. Good afternoon. Picking up from where we left off, I have done some research and pulled together what we should expect to see at connector 1105. So it turns out it's a 4-wire connector. There's a white, which should be a ground. There's a yellow, which we talked about, the 12-volt auxiliary power. There's a blue-black, that's our electronic brake control. And then red and light green, that's trailer brake lamps, but that's already going to be covered by the 4-pin flat that we installed. I was able to figure out from here, it says from trailer ground, it says the wire is white, it says it goes through connector 1105. That's how I was able to determine this. And this is good, which means that we can just snip this wire out of the connector and we can connect our 7-pin directly to that. Look familiar? Here's our 4-way flat. We're back in this corner and I did some digging and this guy is connector 1105. I know this because it's a 4-wire. It has ground, it has our blue with black, it has our yellow, and then if we look on the other side, it has our red with stripe right there. When the bumper was attached back in, presumably in '89, this is the spot that they gave me. Obviously for a 7 and 4 pin, this is way too small. I could try to ream it out, but that would be a really big job. So most likely, I'm going to try to hang it off of here somewhere. I would think about hanging it here, but that would obstruct the license plate and I'd probably get pulled over for that. So, I have learned what happens when you try to knock a self-tapper into a thick piece of steel. It doesn't work so good. So, I have the remains of some metal cutting drill bits. Hopefully I've got the bit size that I need, because I have worn these out, let me tell you. Okay, that wound up taking way too long, but it's in. So, next step. We need to feed our connector through so that we can screw it into place. So you're going to take all your wiring, you're going to feed it through the main hole, like so, and then it's going to do that. Your 4-pin comes around like that, does that, and then we got to take care of this tail here. We'll bring this back in to connect to the back of our 7-pin here. And then it's time to start laying out wires and doing more splicing. Okay, that wound up taking way too long, but it's in. So, next step. We need to feed our connector through so that we can screw it into place. So you're going to take all your wiring, you're going to feed it through the main hole, like so, and then it's going to do that. Your 4-pin comes around like that, does that, and then we got to take care of this tail here. We'll bring this back in to connect to the back of our 7-pin here. And then it's time to start laying out wires and doing more splicing. We are provided 4 Phillips head screws, and then there are nuts with lock washers that go on these. So we're gonna push that through. Okay, so yeah, we got to push it through and that's fine and dandy, but then we need to come around the back side. We're gonna have to nut it. because we do not have threads. We'll take care of those two up top, come back to the two at the bottom. Okay, bring you guys some updates because we went to that next step of running our 12 volt power, right? The black wire. So here's the end of it, right here. Got plenty of room to get over to our circuit breaker. And then I ran it up along, that's an AC connection, all the way back over through this hanger. And then I sent it down the side of the vacuum brake booster, and I'm going to make sure that it stays tucked out of the way of the shift linkage. So you can see there's that linkage there, and it's got to be able to move. So we do not want the wire in the way of that. So I'm going to tuck it, get it out of the way. We also don't want it touching our steering shaft because, you know, when you turn the wheel, that moves. So we don't want that, but we send it down, and it's a little difficult to see from over here, but then we go down to the frame rail. Okay, so we pick up here. We're in the driver's side frame rail. I ran it under the brake line to kind of help set where the wire will go. Again, I'm gonna probably do a lot of zip tie work to make sure we can keep this wire out of the way of any linkages, because again, this is the other part of your steering linkage. It goes to the MLPS ultimately, which is back over here on the transmission. And then we're gonna go down our frame rail. See this white wire? I'm basically following it. And we go down and down and down until we get to our selector valve and our aft or midship or front, whatever you want to call it, fuel tank. So I snuck the wire behind the selector valve. Kind of the same deal that the white wire did. Managed to get it out there, and it's out of the channel right now onto the ground, but you can see it falls short. But we do have about 9 foot of that other black wire from the shorter run that came in our tow ready kit, and I can just butt connect those two, and we'll keep running it down our C channel past this fuel tank. And then we're going to need to keep it high and above any suspension components right there at the wheel, and bring it on back to the rear fuel tank where the party is, right? Good afternoon. Off camera, I went ahead and took care of some wiring stuff as far as zip ties and things, not really camera worthy. And I also did this. And I wanted to show you this because it's an option, right? What these are spade connectors. So I was thinking along the lines of, what if this thing gets damaged and I need to swap it out? If I have spade connectors on all my wires here, I can just disconnect, and there you go. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Much easier to swap things out. On the flip side though, I didn't realize it. I thought these were heat shrinkable. They are not. So what's gonna have to happen is after we plug everything in and we do testing, I have to wrap these with electrical tape to keep moisture out to the best of my ability. If I was really going crazy, I would get some dielectric grease and I would jam it into the front of the connector before I squish it together, and I may still do that. And what that does is, dielectric grease is an insulator, so it keeps junk and contaminants from messing up your electrical connection by insulating whatever's actually connected to each other. So we can do that. Here's our 12 volt hotline that needed to be ran that I was covering yesterday. We took care of that. That's down here. I had to extend these wires out to make everything reach comfortably. So that's what's going on up there. You may not have to, again, I've said this a bunch, custom bumper, right? So the last steps here are we're gonna plug in our wires, and then it's time to reconnect the battery and test. In order to test, we have a couple of different ways that we can do this. We can use my camper, which has an RV 7-pin. We can use my other trailer that you can't see. That would let us test the 4-pin functionality. Or we can use this guy, at least for our 7 pins. This is a, what is the fancy name here? This is a 7-way tester and emulator that is made by Taconcha, and it was given to me by TrailerJacks.com in order to help facilitate this video. So this was given for free. I did not pay for this. Now, I've never used one of these before, but the way I understand it is we're going to plug this in, and then in order to get the various LEDs to light up to show functionality, you do have to actually test the functions. It won't test them on its own. So let's plug this in, and first things first, we're looking for a 12-volt light to show that we've actually wired this correctly. This is kind of exciting. I've been rolling around on my back for a while to do this, so. Okay, we have a BU light. Gonna have to go see what that's all about. But we don't have our 12 volt. All right, updates. I initially thought the problem was maybe I really did need to run my battery line straight to a battery terminal instead of the hot side of my relay switch up here. But then I had a thought, which was, there's no load on this right now, right? I've disconnected the batteries. There's no electricity flowing into this right now. Completely dead. It should have reset. That's a circuit breaker. So it should have reset, meaning the switch inside of it has closed, which means that if I ohm it, if I check resistance, it should be fairly low because those two should be talking to each other. So when I come over here and I check, I know you guys can't see the meter, but I have open line, OL. So that's the problem, is that this is not closing. I don't know why, but with no power on it, it should be closed, but it's not. Let me show you what we should get. So this right here is another circuit breaker that came in either the tow ready or might have been the 7-pin kit. It might have been the brake controller kit. I don't remember. But the point is, it's totally disconnected. I'm set to ohm, so look at the meter when I do this. Check that out. 5 ohms. So this one's closed, like it should be, which means I'm going to swap this one in and see what happens. I don't know what's going on with that one over there. And I tested it over here on plastic to see if it was maybe this needed to be grounded, which didn't make sense to me based on what I know about electricity. And I was right. Here on the plastic, where it would have no ground, works fine. I sat it up on the radiator, which is metal and grounded, works fine. So I'm gonna switch it, see what we get. All right, here we are. Got the new breaker installed. We are connected directly to the battery. I'm happy to report this is now passing battery voltage to the auxiliary terminal, which is what we want. And what that translates into, if we come back and look at our load emulator, is we have 12 volts is lit up, which is excellent. Now, this is backup lights, so this should not be lit up, which means I have something going on there. I think I know what it is, but that is now lit up. I'm going to put you guys on the tripod so you can see everything else in action. So you're on the tripod. Top left is left turn, top right is right turn, top middle is trailer lights, bottom middle is brake controller. And all of those are only going to light up when there's actual load being pulled. So I have to go turn on the lights and turn left and turn right, and I can actuate the manual brake lever on the controller, and hopefully we see that light up. And then I'm going to have to go inside. There is a storm rolling in. And while I am a Floridian, which means that I am somewhat crazy by definition, that should be trailer lights. That should be turned left. Even I am not this crazy. This should be turned right. Oh wait, we need the keys rolled forward, sorry. Okay, turn left. Turn right. And you'll notice trailer lights are on, trailer lights are off. And then when I pull this, spoiler alert, already checked, but everything lights up. I'm not sure why. I'm going to do some research on that to see what's going on with that. So all in all, we are really, really close. Good afternoon. Off camera, I've been doing a bit of research to understand why the emulator is showing the reverse lights constantly on, and I have figured out the why. This is a diagram from the manual for the Takancha trailer emulator, the tester. And the key thing we want to look at is that our yellow here, it's listed as a center auxiliary, right? And we know from watching this video, following along with me, that I sent 12 volts positive here. And we also know from looking at our wire schematics that this 12 volts is hot at all times. So that means that this is constantly getting 12 volts. Now, I thought that this pin was for auxiliary power, i.e. your accessory charge wire, charging up batteries and things like that. Not so. What that actually is right here. This black wire is battery charge. So that's this guy up here. That would be the black wire that we ran from the battery. And that's our 12 volts that we were seeing and we should be seeing. Now, it turns out the center pin, it floats around a little bit as far as what it is, but on a Ford, this center pin, that's your reverse lights. So that's why that was constantly lit up, because I was running 12 volts constant there. As soon as I disconnected that wire, it went out. And what needs to go here is a black and pink wire. And I can show you where that's located. I found the trailer wiring connector for it. So let me show you that. So here we are under the truck again. You can see I've disconnected the 12 volt, right? And that took care of that problem. I'm gonna leave this 12 volt here in case I need to power an accessory or something, which is handy to have around. What should have really happened is that this yellow wire should have been connected to this black wire coming off the 7 pin, and we would have been good, and we would have never have had to run this 12 volt line from the battery. But I like keeping my color coordination, so I like having black to black, white to white, blue to blue, so I'm going to leave it as is. Now, this guy right here is, I can't remember the connector number. It's a 1000 series connector. I think it's 1114, I think it is. This is your trailer, your second trailer wiring connector. And if you look carefully, there is a black wire with pink stripe right there, and that is the wire for your reverse lights. So what we're going to need to do is pretty similar to what we just did, is we're going to need to clip that wire out and then extend it to plug in to our yellow wire. Welcome back to the greasy side back here. So what I did for the reverse stuff, the part I picked up did fix my backup light, so we're good there. Is we've got our black and pink coming off of our trailer connector. We've got that going to this really ridiculous wire that I found in the shop, so I definitely know that's my backup line. Got that connected up to our yellow. So in theory, we should be good to go now. Let's go look at our load emulator. Oh, holy moly, is it toasty in here. All right, key rolled forward. In reverse. So that's a welcome sight. I have reverse lights again. I don't know how long they were broken. Oops. And check that out. Reverse. With that, our 7-pin is now testing correctly. We are done with our wiring. All that is left is shrinking our butt splices and doing our zip ties and cleaning up our mess. Still need to clean this up a bit, obviously. But functionality is done. And all in all, it looks way better than if you are just tapping directly into all your vehicle wires. So I'm really pleased. That's going to do it for this video. I hope that this is going to be educational and informational and help you to set up a 7 and 4-pin connector on your brick nose F-Series trucks or your bull nose F-Series trucks or your OBS style trucks. Because as a reminder, what we just did covers basically early 80s all the way up through late 90s, right before we go into Super Duty, right? That's 1999. So I hope this helps somebody out. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I know that this one got a little tricky wiring-wise versus some of the other things that I do. And I also would like to again thank TrailerJacks for providing the load emulator. They have also provided me a more economy brake balance controller that I can make a video on later. Maybe going into the F100 that you can't see on the other side of the camera. I'm not sure yet. But a big thank you to them for their customer support and gifting me those things so that I can bring this video to you. I would not have been able to figure out what was going on with the reverse light auxiliary line 12-volt snafu that I set up, and I wouldn't have been able to tip off that my MLPS was bad, which that was news to me. I was not expecting to have to troubleshoot that today. In any case, that's the end of this episode. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you for the next one.